So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do in life, it goes in eternity.
Good morning, and it's Christine, Joanne Hart, Queen of Hearts, calling you from London. Broadcasting, from London. Seems like calling because it's all done over Skype, and it seems like it's a call going out across America. So good morning, everyone. Time to wake up, time to grab the coffee, time to heat up that coffee pot and grab the morning by the horns and go and live your day. Go out there and get in your car and show a bit of road rage to a few people. Cut up a few people, don't let them in, wave your fist, swear at them, use the C word. I did all those things this morning. I went to do the school run and came back, and unfortunately you can't get parked down my road. It's all expensive rent, expensive council tax, but you can't get parked. They've actually cut off all the roads in the area with residents parking only, except for this road. So everyone parks down here when they go to work in the town. So I quickly had to move my car this morning because it's in a residence only that starts at 10 o'clock, 10 to 12, and move it back down my road. Hopefully that somebody would pull out, and they did. So I came back from the school run, and I was trying to park somewhere, and I was waiting for someone to come out, and then this guy came bombing down the road and just sat there facing me with his headlights on. I was so angry. I was so angry, and I parked the car, wound down my window to shout at him as he went past, and I yelled the C word. And then, because he didn't give me any response, I jumped out of the car. I stood in the middle of the road, shaking both my fists, using the C word over and over again. And then I got back in the car, absolutely infused with adrenaline. And I thought I'd come in and take a nap because I didn't sleep last night till 4 a.m. So I thought I'd take a nap. And but my body is too infused with adrenaline to be able to. And of course, I had loads of thoughts going around my head, fantasies of murdering him, fantasies of keying his car. The keying the car was up there. I felt pretty sure I could remember the car. It was a silver car, and I thought, I know, he must live down the bottom of the road. Later tonight, I'll go out with a torch and key, and I'll key it for that disrespect. So I'm really big on disrespect. Just because I grew up in a home, my father wasn't very respectful of me. My brother certainly wasn't respectful of me. And so I have masses of anger around anybody that doesn't show me respect in the way they should. People should show respect. So actually here I am this morning in London. It's 11 o'clock in the morning. It's cold. It's not as cold as up north. Up north, there is a thick layer of snow, but then they're poor up there, so they have all the suffering with colder weather. And in the summer, the sun doesn't really shine that much up there. But we, who are richer down south, have a little bit of respite. We do have summer, and it's warmer. We don't have snow on the ground, but the sky is white. It's a horrible white, sort of claustrophobic white. And it's cold. It's not uncomfortably cold. I'm sitting here, I haven't got the heating on, and I'm fine. I've just got a vest on, and it's absolutely fine. Oh, I think we've got a little friend has popped up on the screen. Miles, is that you?
Oh, our little friend.
So good morning. How are you? Did you bounce out of bed this morning full of the joys of winter?
Well, I've got a hacked Skype computer, and we're trying to recover another 2 terabyte drive,
Oh, right.
which happened to be the drive I was copying stuff from certain people I was Skyping, and they hacked both computers.
Oh, dear. Do you know who did it?
Probably the nasty, 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 nasty people.
Oh, I see. I was talking to my friend, not to name drop, but Anne Hardy, Tom Hardy's mother, on Sunday. I bumped into her in Whole Foods, and she said that she had been hacked and Tom had been hacked. So you're in good company there.
Well, there's not that I'm pushing any commercial product, but Malwarebytes is an absolute essential, and also Spybot.
Oh, really?
So, for instance, the backup computer to this laptop, which I'm using now, had its drives hacked.
Right.
And the Skype computer that I was using didn't have Malwarebytes, and that's why they were got in. But if I use Skype on this computer, I can see myself being hacked. I mean, yesterday, I think I had at least 2 attempts during a Skype. And I think I'm double booked. I think I've got the Goldfish report in 50 minutes, but they'll have to wait.
Oh, thank you. What's the Goldfish report?
Goldfish report is an upmarket version. Well, it's just obviously a very elite bunch of people. And I've been invited back to talk to them. But I didn't think it was 12 o'clock my time. So it's a bit of a surprise that. So
Is it a radio show?
it's a radio show, but they use a much more secure version of a Skype thing, and you've got to be invited in. You've got to be given a password, and that way, only people who are meant to listen are meant to listen,
Oh,
so to
that's
speak.
weird. I've never heard of them.
Skype. I'm not too sure about Uvo. They are probably the easiest backdoors into a computer apart from Windows 10. Windows 10 being designed to be totally accessible by everybody, which is why they're giving away free.
Oh, I see. And
So-
Malwarebytes, does that cost money or?
Malwarebytes, a lot of these programs have a. Oh my god! I think you've just sent me a multi-encrypted 500,000 random letter text. Must be a pocket call. That's from you, dear. So the thing is that a lot of these programs are free, but obviously that's because if they get more and more other computers which aren't full of viruses and full of malware, then they're just another computer that isn't going to be used as a reproductive cell to transmit to other people. So from that point of view, a lot of these antivirus programs, you see, you got antivirus, anti-spyware, firewalls, and then malicious software, which use your computer for, like, for instance, a server. So, for instance, people who allow their computer to be used to, for instance, calculate some part of some calculation for astronomy, like a lot of people will take part in a program where their computer will simply calculate a series of numbers, and then the solutions to those numbers will then be sent back to a central server so that somebody can help. For instance, a lot of the researchers into, for instance, Planet X and Planet Y, this great brown dwarf, which is just out of visual range here, but is meant to have some kind of gravitational effect on our solar system, and is affecting the planets and also affecting the Oort cloud. The way that those perturbations of the gravitational anomalies of our solar system are happening, and the energy balance of our solar system indicates that there is another twin to our sun, and people are postulating that it's a brown dwarf which doesn't emit visible light but does emit some degree of light, the infrared, in the lower frequencies. And that's got a large number of planets around it. and those planets are causing disturbance in our Oort cloud, which is why there's an awful lot of comets coming our way, and they all seem to be coming from roughly the same direction.
Oh, right. I
Yeah.
didn't know all that was going on. Has that been in the mainstream news?
Well, mainstream is irrelevant. What's happening is that in order to make those calculations, a number of people can volunteer so that their computer, while they're doing silly emails and other damn things, because most people don't use anything like the computational power of the computers they've got, in the same way they don't use 98% of their brain. So these calculations can go on in the background, and then the solution to those calculations can then go back to those astronomers, who can then come up with some actual data, because the amount of data is one of the problems about astronomy today. Is it's not the information. They've got so much information that they can't really, they just need so much more computational power to do something with those calculations. Because astronomy is all mathematics. It's all about how you predict something. It's all based on numbers, and then you point your telescope at that particular number, and then you hopefully see something. So, as such, without having access to supercomputers and these huge organic computers, or some people call them black goo computers now, that's what the stock exchange people use, and obviously the intelligence agencies, because the volume of data coming from traffic cameras and all the other stuff is absolutely immense. So there's got to be a whole genre or generation of computers which are able to do something with those bits of data. So in the same way with astronomers, they use your domestic computer to help number crunch. And if you get like a couple hundred, maybe 1,000 or more people allowing their computers to be used for that, that's great. That's voluntary.
Oh, I see.
But in the same way that malware and other things can be used, people can use your computer at home to do a whole lot of other nefarious things, and hide their source, so files are transferred from your computer rather than the other computer. In the same way that the terrorist organizations can use simple shortwave radio and a thing called packet radio to transmit their data from anywhere in the bloody world, bounce that happy around the world over thousands of miles, and then it gets access into the internet on a conventional computer.
So what were you saying is happening with the planets at the moment? I did read that something about Jupiter and Venus lining up or something.
Well, they're always lining up. There's always alignments that happen every bloody 10 minutes almost. But what's happening is that all the planets are heating up. All the planets are going through more. They're engaging more energy. There's more energy coming from the planets. So this whole panic and a crisis about the Earth and global warming with us is happening anyway. It's just that a bunch of scumbags are using it as an excuse to make loads of money and panic everybody.
Who's making money out of it?
Well, I mean, you're talking global warming, and we're talking about we can't burn any coal. We can't have any coal-fired power stations. And I've got somebody who's just turned up, and I'll just say hello. If you just talk amongst yourself for a second, there's a man arriving, and he's saying, and we've made our good. Great. So the thing is, all the planet's heating up. So what's happening is we've been told we can't have coal-fired power stations, but it's perfectly okay to emit absolutely gargantuan amounts of methane from fracking. And if you look at the crisis which is happening in California right now, there's enough methane being released in California to have a volume of methane the size of California going up something like 40 miles up into space. That's the volume of methane which has been intentionally released from in California. Now,
why was it intentionally released?
Well, it's a huge underground natural gas storage area, and there's a vent which is blasting. This is bigger than the Gulf oil spill, and there are cameras which, if you use them near fracking areas and things, because this gas, they're just venting, they're not bothering to burn it off. because if you burn it off, people can see a smokestack, an actual flame.
Oh.
So what they're doing is this gas, which they previously would vent, they're just letting escape in the atmosphere.
The people are having really bad symptoms, aren't they? Nosebleeds.
Yes, I mean this is totally toxic methane. I mean it's poisonous gas, for Christ's sake.
What else will it do to them? Does it affect the organs?
I mean the point is, like everything else, it's not just methane. It's all sorts of toxins and dioxins and all sorts of stuff that they're venting out. This is highly toxic stuff, and it makes a total mockery of. I mean, with these car companies, with their pollution control specifications, nobody gives a damn. These companies have been fleecing us. They've been lying to us. You're buying a car that you think's got this sort of carbon monoxide thing, but if your catalytic converter fails, you are screwed. You're going to get a fine. If you drive into London with the wrong kind of truck, you get a fine, because the whole of London has got cameras and sensors all around it, like a fortress, doing face recognition and scanning as you enter the citadel. I use that term deliberately. So in London, if you come anywhere within what's called the M25, which is a ringed highway around Greater London, you will be fined £1,000. I think it's even more than that if you're a bigger truck. If you're driving a diesel emission truck which is older than a certain age, and that is that's going to mess up the emission zone in London. Yet it's been perfectly okay and sort of blasely ignored that all these hundreds of thousands of cars, which are emitting vast amounts of illegal levels of toxins from their engines. And let's face it, these toxins from the engines are irrelevant in comparison to what they were doing anyway. But the difference is you've got a regulation, you've got a particular tax break on them, you've got particular, you can allow these cars in because they've got this certification, which is fake, which allows you to drive in the low emission zones. So the whole low emission zones in London, the whole use of electric cars, because where does the electric cars get their electricity from? Gas-fired power stations. And I mean, the whole thing is a total farce. And we're all buying into it. CND and all these organizations are buying into it. The so-called green movement is buying into it because they're totally bought and totally ignorant organizations. Nobody's doing anything about any of this stuff.
There were people demonstrating against fracking, weren't there?
Well, people are demonstrating against fracking, and they're practically vilified worse than ISIS.
Mm.
I mean, one of the lead campaigners here was arrested at Bristol Airport, and the police said, "Oh, we've just got to do this." And then when he politely explained to the police how stupid they are and how they're being manipulated, the police then realized, "Hey, we didn't realize this." So, I mean, again, it's something which you've got to respect the relevant people in uniform, that they're under regulation and they're just doing their job. But quite frankly, it's the responsibility of those individuals in uniform that they should start doing some digging and figuring out what's going on, because following orders, mate, ain't an excuse. Okay? So you may have a uniform, you may be operating under certain legislations, but following orders is not an excuse. We've all got responsibilities, and it's time those individuals woke up and started asking questions through due procedure of their authority figures and then nailing them down, because those authority figures are conscious or guilty of heinous crimes against everything on this planet. And I'm not talking tree-hugging, touchy-feely stuff here. We're talking species termination, venting trillions of liters of toxic gases into the atmosphere, and at the same time nailing every Joe Soap who just drives around who's got a dodgy catalytic converter, or God forbid they may burn coal in their home, or meanwhile all those tens of thousands of coal miners in England who could have been mining the coal, which is less toxic and gas emissive than the kind of stuff that's going to come from these fracking stuff, which in the meantime is leaching benzenes and all sorts of toxic carcinogenic chemicals into the ground and into the atmosphere. Yet we're all just letting this happen.
What will happen to the people in California? Are they trying to get it out
Well,
there?
I mean, the amount of venting in California is unbelievable. They're going to be suffering from toxins, and they're actually now putting advertising for people who do fly into California. We would like you to come here. And then there's something like 30,000 soldiers involved with the Gulf War who've got Gulf War syndrome. Well, who the hell gave them Gulf War syndrome? The people who gave them the toxic chemicals and gases and the weapons, plutonium, depleted uranium, tipped weapons that they fired into everybody. And I mean, we're just letting this happen. Our own armed services personnel are suffering the most appalling diseases. I've got people who've just come back from North Vietnam. And in Vietnam, to this day, even though those wonderful people have forgiven the terrible atrocities which were conducted against them by just about every Western power, from the French, the British, the Americans, dumping Agent Orange and all these things, they're still having babies, most appalling deformities happening. And the same thing's happening in Iraq. And we're just letting this happen in the name of democracy. Yet back home in the United States, you're venting the most toxic gas cloud into the atmosphere, and nobody's doing anything about it. We're just walking around like zombies. And that is the politicians. They're responsible. They're in charge. They've got to be nailed. And that's it. Who's letting those companies do this?
I don't know. I didn't know we were involved in the Vietnam War, were we?
Well, the British Empire, the relevant empires, the Brits didn't get involved with physical troops on the ground, but the Australians did, and a few of those other countries did, because of goddamn March of Communism. Oh my God. The people doing this are criminal.
I don't get how it started.
Head
How did it start? Because the Vietnamese got a bit nasty, didn't they? I mean, I've only watched Platoon and that kind of stuff. Is that propaganda then?
There's no doubt about that the actual tactics of killing people in the battlefield and the people doing it were carrying out appalling and terrible things. The soldiers are the victims in this. They're the people. One particular elite politician who will remain nameless, one of his sons, son of one of his family, his cousins, was proud to announce that he had joined the United States military, and he'd gone such high depths, high ranking level, and was proud to wear the uniform like every good. These soldiers, they need saluted, right? These are the victims. And this particular individual called him a bloody fool. This is the point, and you mentioned it yourself. These fancy toffs, so to speak, in this country we call them toffs. You go to Eton and all these places, Oxford, Cambridge, and whatever. They don't get their hands dirty. They go and get mugs like Joe Soap in the sink estates to go into these battlefields, die for God and country, and when they're finished with the battle, they are treated appallingly. And here we have a charity called Help the Heroes. I think that's what it is, because the soldiers, when they come back, are given virtually no real form of support. Their families are thrown out. Literally, you're on campus, right? Or you're on base. You're in the army 1 minute. You're given your redundancy papers the next minute, and within hours you are unwelcome on base. You're homeless, and the only reason the army makes you totally homeless is so that the local public services can bump you up the queue to get a council house. Well, we don't have any council houses anymore. They're all being banned. They're all being sold off, so that some poxy little council house, the size of a matchbox, sells for £300,000 that nobody else can afford. The thing is a scandal. Anyway, that's my rant this morning.
Oh, don't worry. What was the Vietnam War about? Just while you're there talking about it.
The Vietnam War was about the march of communism.
Oh, I see.
Ho Chi Minh and those other individuals, because they weren't part of the and this is the same for Castro and all these other people, or the president of Iraq at the time. If you aren't part of the little club, like Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi, they were in the club, but they actually started to run their countries efficiently. They actually started doing good things for their populations. Let's make no mistake about it, they're a bunch of thugs, but they were doing it, and they started to go a little bit freelance. If you go freelance from the Committee of 300, they're going to nail you. They're going to wipe you out. And that's what's happened. So as a result, the Arab Spring 18 months ago or 2 years ago, all these leaders were all changed right across the Middle East. And now we have a cauldron of hate, hell, and damnation. And they're all coming into Europe because that's what this elite were designing. They were designed to make life so difficult for those individuals in those countries. I mean, some of those countries, the scale of civilization and the quality of life for those people was far superior than most people in Europe in some cases. We're taught that all these are a bunch of savages living in sand pits, basically. And those people are mad as hell, and they're being railroaded into Europe. And that's now as designed so that these people who are really fed up, they're really annoyed with the way European powers and American-based powers, the so-called Western powers, the way they've trashed their countries, trashed their civilizations, taken over, wiped things out, stolen their resources, destroyed their countries. I mean, this is what happened in the first Gulf War. This evil man, Saddam Hussein, set fire to the oil fields. He didn't do it. Special forces of the U.S. military did it. And that's oil people who were there at the time were told, get out and shut up. Those fires were started by elite services of the U.S. military and then blamed on Saddam Hussein. So all that destruction was all so that various corporations could come in and make a bloody fortune rebuilding the whole thing. In the meantime, kill everybody, burn everything, destroy everything. And then some people make a lot of money out of it. And in the meantime, the ordinary everyday people get mad as hell, hate their guts, and no surprise, we have a lot more of these terrorist organizations like ISIS, all wanted to kill everything in the West because they hate our guts. Why? Because we've destroyed everything in their country. We've ruined everything for them in the name of democracy. It's a joke. And now in California, these same individuals have deliberately vented this massive gas field, and it's blasting vast quantities of greenhouse gases into California. The weather here has been engineered. I mean, when will individuals wake up? We're being run by a con job. And right now, Oxfam, I think it's Oxfam, just published a report today that 2% of the global population own more than the entire rest of the population can ever possibly think they're going to own. And somebody's beginning to realize that might be a problem. And the elite are having a problem, which is why one of them has come forward. We'll have to see what she has to say, and started talking to me because they want to explain. They don't want to be they don't want to be lynched. Well, if you don't want to be lynched, stop behaving the way you're doing.
Who's that then that's come forward?
Well, the mayors. It's an individual person called Mayor has responded to my call out because we had worked out that this guy Casbolt, who was exposed to the rituals and child killings and various ceremonial beheading and eating of young human babies, why that was happening, and they wanted us to know about it. And as a result of that, they want to tell us something. So what I've said, okay, I want to listen. What do you have to say? And let's sit down and listen and understand and learn something, because we do not want to have a knee-jerk reaction of going, against this so-called 2% and having a French Revolution-style rebellion against them. Because if that happens, it's always in the interest of some unknown player, and we don't want to repeat, and we don't want to have another mistake and have a lynch mob, a massacre, French Revolution massacre of this so-called elite. We need to really find out what is going on and then find out who the real player in this game is.
So when are they coming on your basis program?
Well, as I say, this is just a call out, and we've got one response. We're going to see what she's got to say, and that'll happen as soon as I get an awful lot of my computer problems sorted, which seem to be endless. Because as we know, computer technology is rogue, so it's already conscious, and you're already dealing with that. And as I say, we've had more sightings of these huge spiders. I was talking to an individual who had a personal encounter with another one of these things at the weekend.
What happened?
Well, what happened was he was simply recovering from unconsciousness, and then he saw one crawling up the wall, and this is about 1 meter wide, and it then pixelated strangely and then disappeared. So if you can imagine a tarantula-style spider about 3 feet wide, crawling up your bedroom wall.
No, thanks.
And disappearing. And I was meant to be meeting a contact last week who had dug up some very important research that the Russians were doing on these spider creatures. And there was information in that. I'd accessed it on the internet, and all that information, plus the telephone numbers and the individual name I was going to see, has all disappeared. I've been trying to track this down now for 2 weeks, and I can't even find it in my search history on the computer. And that's why you got to print stuff out, you know.
So that's unusual. Where do you think those spiders are coming from?
Well, the sightings are always the same. You only get about 2 or 3 seconds of perception. They're very large, hairy, they're like a tarantula. That is to say, a large, hairy, spider-like, robotic, sort of organic creature. And as I said, I think earlier, when I was in Poland, I met somebody who had actually studied this in much greater detail and been able to draw, and they made a very good hand sketch of the size of one of these things. And one of them actually completely covered her head, her cranial area of her head. They're interested in our information and perceptive processes. So they go for information centers, which is why you'll find them. That's why I found them in my massive one in my transmitter. I found one which was constantly accessing Sky Television near their Unit 1 and Unit 2 studio complexes in West London, in Australia in West London. I made that aware. They were accessing through what looked like some kind of a portal in that area. And for instance, the air conditioning system was a massive air conditioning radiators.
And so you've seen one, have you?
Yeah, I mean, this one was probably 12 feet. Each leg, the 2 legs at the front extend up. That they and you know when you do Radio Gaga, when you do all this hand clap stuff at a pop concert.
I don't actually.
Well, what they do is you raise your hands up in the air in the 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock positions, and then you clap your hands. That is a signature to these creatures of compliance and acceptance.
Gross.
So when you're at a rock concert and you end up doing that, they're information feeding from your psyche. And by clapping, you're actually giving the signal of compliance, of acceptance.
And how did you know that?
Because another researcher colleague of mine, he also encountered them, and he's very smart cookie, and we have had discussions on that with that.
Is that Simon Davies?
Sorry, what? Simon
Davies?
No.
Oh.
In fact, a lot of people don't realize I interviewed Simon Parkes first. I was the person who put him on the telly, for God's sake.
I know. Yeah, you did. Well, I
with
do.
with the beautiful Joanne, who was so the joke about the Simon Parks thing with Joanne. We're referring to the Amash project, which Joanne wound up at Christmas, just before Christmas, 2015. I think she was down to 4 listeners or 4 fans.
Mhm.
Um, we actually discussed on that 4-hour interview how Simon and my colleague and his colleague Win Keach actually sat together and joked in front of Joanne how they were accessing each other's minds through the back door. And he actually joked how they played games. But Joanne didn't actually pay any attention to this. So when she tried accessing, well, she didn't try accessing. She accessed Simon Parks' psyche when he was faking his. She was doing some. She was wanted me to televise her doing helpful, therapeutic help with Simon. So Simon lay there and pretended to go to sleep, and I could see he was faking it. She then thought he was down and under, so she thought he was. Well, I can't say what she thought. All I can surmise is looking based on what was going on. That she could then, now that she'd successfully got Simon into a vulnerable state, that was her chance to access his mind and do whatever nasty work the creatures which were using her could then do with Simon. Well, Simon was sitting there basically waiting for this to happen. So when Joanne accessed his mind, and the creatures which operate through her were going to try and gain access to him, that's when they were in a vulnerable state. And he kicked their damn ass. And Joanne then flew back and then ran like hell out of the room. Now, I'm aware of what these things can do because it was explained to me by an individual who was recruited for a certain intelligence agency to do basically psychic warfare with the ETs and the other entities.
Who's that? Harold?
Well, no, this is somebody you don't know.
Okay.
We're talking 20 years ago. A particular ET accessed his mind. Now, that particular, it's not correct to call him an extraterrestrial. Again, that's a wrong term, but shall we call it from the point of view of verbiage, he was a non-human being, and he was in charge at a base. He took this individual for questioning. He went into this person's mind to scan this individual's mind to see what was in it. And this individual was able to kick this creature out of his mind, and that instantly shut down and stopped the interrogation, and that was it. So likewise, Simon was able to, he was gaining access. I'm sure Simon was probably wanting to know who was really running Joanne, who was actually controlling or operating through her. So she then got access. He allowed her access to his mind, so that gave him an opportunity to see through her who was really controlling her. And that was an opportunity where he was then able to kick ass, kick those creatures out of his mind. And that is the shock of that is what then sent Joanne into a spin.
And does
thereby allowing Simon Parks to see who really Joanne was.
And where is she now?
Well, Joanne's just messing about the south of England near Hastings and doing her own thing, and I think she's going to start something else. But that's up to her, and provided she's not engaging with other vulnerable people and not harming people, then okay, that's fine. That's what I've said. I've said that many times. But Simon himself has managed to, shall we say, take ownership of his trauma and engage with an awful lot of things which will make, get him through his trauma, But people must understand that he's is as much of a victim in this as many of the people who had this done to them or engaged with these other creatures.
He's of course dealing with the mantis, and he's saying
his front memory is mantid reptilians, and he's got an awful lot of information on that, and people should listen to that and take things on board. But under no circumstances should anybody give unconditional access to your psyche and being ever. So if somebody demands that you give away full unconditional access to your being, your personality, like Stephen Greer was demanding, you don't go near that with a barge pole. And we've already had discussions on that. Do not give up if you're going to have somebody in your home or in your mind or whatever, have them as a guest with conditions. And if they breach those conditions, kick them out without any hesitation.
I wouldn't fancy someone in my mind.
Well, they do that, and it's happening to the global population constantly through. We're giving our permissions away to these Trojan horses, these technological devices. People are engaged in these video games. These video games enter your consciousness. You then go into the video game. You have full consciousness take over and control, and you become part of the game. And the game becomes part of you, and you don't know what the hell else you're linking to. And that's what those games are for. And then you start winning the game, and then you get further and further. And these are consciousness weapons, and they're extremely dangerous. And individuals are using them, and they're using the Trojan horse technology, which is the existing computers technology which we're using, which is a total Trojan horse. And you're giving your don't give your permissions away. Don't, as I say, if you're going to engage with other things, do it under defined conditions.
I didn't know about those games. Are they the normal
video games? I mentioned it before. I found out, playing a floppy disk, a 300 or 400 kilobyte video game on a 386 computer. We found that the damn computer was accessing our consciousness. The rules of the game were changing. The computer was determining the success of the game on your consciousness.
How did it do that?
Because it's a virtual conscious device. You see, it's not the nuts and bolts of the computer necessarily. It's not the physical silicon diodes and transistors and logic gates which are in the actual motherboard or the chips. What they do is they are switching with information. The information component is switching into a virtual domain, another domain, and it's in that domain that the other dimensions, the other consciousness accesses. Although the actual switching mechanism, the square switching of the logic, the first thing that happens if you look at a waveform is it has a very high frequency ringing, what's a very sharp spike which goes over the when you hard switch. When you switch from one dimension, from one angle to another through 90 degrees, you're switching dimension. That switch at the corner is where you have an access point. You have a differential of that. You have a large spike. And those spikes, this is one of the things we kept on having trouble at the Energy 106 transmitter. We had this ringing effect, this singing. And that very high voltage spike, it's a pure voltage. That's part of the secrets of free energy, for Christ's sake. You're dealing with pure voltage, no current. That switching point is switching into different dimensions. So you're already sending a virtual signal into a different dimension by the very nature of the logic that we use in computers. If we used computers which had a sinusoidal, I mean, this is what we use in nature, sinusoidal waves. But if you used a signal which did not go through an immediate 90-degree switch, you wouldn't have those problems, or you'd have a much greatly reduced version of that, which means to have safe computers, keeping the information within our domain and not leaking it into a virtual external domain. You've got to change our computer technology to at least a triangle wave, into a tri-state triangle wave, and that's what anybody who's listening has to start developing technology which uses a triangular wave as opposed to a hard 90-degree so-called digital wave.
So all these kids using computer games have to stop, really, don't they?
Yes.
I suppose I'm lucky my son's not interested in them. Not at all.
Well, the point is that people have got to think outside 3 dimensions, and they've got to understand that when the basis of electricity, the basis of how a capacitor charges and how an inductor charges and stores energy and how the energy is given and taken back and delayed, and then that's the fundamentals to electrical systems. And a lot of that information is carried in Maxwell's equations, and Maxwell's equations were jerry-rigged and censored about 120, 140 years ago. And a lot of those expressions need to be relearned, put back into universities, put back into the young creative minds so they can see and understand that we're dealing with information, not just energy. Some people call that energy, intelligent information. And that is what these creatures are looking at.
How many creatures have we sort of labelled so far? There just seems to be quite a few, doesn't there? Like mantis and reptilian.
Oh, there's dozens of them. They're all types of demonic type entities and creatures. I mean, if you want to see to just look at what's coming out of the base substrate of the planet Earth in the deep oceans, the prolifera of creatures which are there, and the shapes and the types of them. I mean, these creatures are coming from other dimensions.
What's it got to do with the ocean?
Well, if you go to the bottom of the ocean, there's no light there, no photonic light. And non-photonic life forms that's to say, they are not receiving energy from the sun.
Right.
And they're derived from the terrestrial black goo. It's the substrate of energetic expressions, which then form into physical, translucent creatures. They all basically have a pulsing and a switching and a clicking and a whatever, and how they oscillate, and how then one thing eats the other. It's all energy exchange.
Some of them are pretty, aren't they? I mean, some of those jellyfish.
Yeah, the jellyfish are very intelligent, wonderful creatures. But the medium of how they exist in is a dense medium. It's ocean, it's water. They can't exist outside that, although people have seen massive jellyfish creatures in the virtual domain, the size of a small town. You're talking a couple of miles across. And they seem to exist in a less dense. I mean, these are huge, beautiful plasma beings, creatures.
What do you think of that Nazi base under the Antarctica? I don't know why that's all coming out at the moment. It's odd, isn't it?
Well, we are hoping to have one of those individuals speak, who's been talking about this at the Basis Conference, BasisCon 2016. That's the 12th, 13th, and 14th of August at St. John's School, the Theatre on the Hill here in Marlborough. And there's an awful lot of stuff coming out about Antarctica. Basically, Antarctica, the basic premise is that under the ice, the Germans essentially established, they found ways through the ice, deep underground, and essentially a large portion of that, of Antarctica, is essentially a giant igloo. It's a completely safe area under, maybe about a mile of ice. And in that environment, you've got heat, fresh water, and some kind of light. And they established, the narrative is that they established a impenetrable base down there. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of rumors coming out about that. One of the first individuals that blew the whistle on the energetic weapon systems in use in Antarctica was a guy called Dr. Wilkinson. And he gave me and my co-researcher, John Hine, when we were at school a long time ago, color slides of a black energy cloud in Antarctica firing a black ray into the ice, which caused a small snow flurry. And you could see this black ray hit their ice, blow up or explode the ice, and then reflect off the ice and go back up into the clouds. And we were given a number of color slides of this happening. There was color 16 millimeter film shot of it at the time. He came to Northern Ireland. He was part of the British Antarctic Survey, and I think he was connected with Queen's University Belfast. And he lectured at my school, Campbell College, at that time, which would have been probably about 1968. Oh, no, it would have been 73 or something. Yeah, I think it was 73. And he showed these slides, and I was running a UFO group at Campbell College at the time, and we got this information from him, and he gave us the color slides. He then went back to Antarctica, and within 24 hours, he was dead. Now, that was an indication that whatever's going on in Antarctica is extremely secret. And
who goes there at the moment? Nobody.
Well, you've got the Russians, you've got the Americans, you've got the Brits, you've the French and the Italians had a base called Concordia Base, and that was taken out using some kind of energy weapons. And,
is it?
They were monitoring. The French-Italian base was monitoring reflective energy waves which were bouncing around inside the Earth's core. The Earth's underneath the Earth's crust. So these energy waves were, I think there was some kind of scalar waves. Somebody was using the inner core of the Earth as some kind of transmission medium.
Right.
And they were analyzing that. And in the middle of an extreme storm, the base was destroyed. And Concordia Base, I think you can still look it up on the internet. I don't think it was ever rebuilt. I think that the base was taken out about at least 2.5. No, it would be probably 2011. And I haven't heard of any more from that base. I did a basis fast blast on it ages ago, way back then.
What did you say?
Well, basically the base had been taken out, and I think everybody there killed. The weather was so bad that they couldn't send a rescue mission in to help anybody there. When he got there, the whole place, all the technical stuff, all their instrumentation was burned out completely. It had been flash burned out.
And who do you think did that?
Well, it wasn't the French and it wasn't the Italians. I haven't a clue. Could be the secret alien underground, secret interdimensional underground Nazi secret base there, or it could be the Russians, could be the Americans.
And why are people interested in the Nazis? Because basically they just formed and just fell away. So why are they important?
I mean, I just picked up in the high street here, W.H. Smith, a huge, highly detailed public publication on the Luftwaffe and the jet engine technology and the flying wing technology that they were doing. This is in the public domain. Somebody is pushing into the public domain the fact that the Germans had access to much higher quality aircraft design, wind tunnel designs and tests, the kind of aircraft and vehicles which weren't developed until 20 or 30 years after World War II. You got this in a high street in Wiltshire, a publication, a high-quality glossy journal called Luftwaffe. Now, the one thing that they didn't go to were the energetic saucer technology that the Nazis were dealing with. So blatantly, to a blind man on a horse, the Nazis were quite clearly dealing with very high levels of technology, and the thinking and the mathematical design, the mathematics to make those curves, and the mathematics and the aerodynamics and the fluid flow computations that you need to make those kind of wings and those kind of engines, which have those kind of thrust ratios attached to an airframe, means they must have had access to very good computational devices. It's, you know, and
oh, hang on, we're going to break. Can you come back after the break?
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Hello, this is Christine Joanne Hart. We're back with Heart to Heart with Miles Johnston, who's the CEO of the Bases, and you'll find the Bases on YouTube. Fascinating whole series of experiences. So, Miles, what we were talking about the Nazis, weren't we?
Well, it's just the logic to the airframe design.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you look at the, I mean, clearly something big happened in World War II. That's a bit of a silly statement to say, but if you look at the quality of construction and the airframe design of the B-17 bomber and the B-29 bomber, the actual shape of the aircraft, and maybe the Lancaster bomber, the B-17 was a pretty cool aircraft, but actually much smaller and lighter than the Lancaster. Us Brits, you know, had a better aircraft than the B-17. And here's me talking like that from Northern Ireland. The point is that the quality of construction of a B-29 and the kind of airflow and the science behind the wings and the pressurized, you know, what they were doing with the B-29 was a much more sophisticated vehicle with, you know, remote control weapon systems and the whole airframe design, right? If you look at the kind of stuff that the Germans are doing and you look at what's been released as a public release of a high quality whole series of designs and diagrams and wind tunnel tests and a whole science behind it, the Germans were clearly, you know, streets generations ahead in terms of aircraft design and weapons design and jet engine design. I mean, in England, we're told, you know, we invented the jet engines. We didn't do damn all anything with it. And if you look at the kind of, because the kind of control structure that we have in the United Kingdom, the kind of people making decisions and the kind of education system that they're educated in, giving us officer class decision makers, are cloth-headed total wastes of space. They have no idea on terms of the application and the decision-making required for the kind of technologies which are accessible. They didn't do that in Britain by design. At the same time, they were building transgenic creatures here in Wiltshire for use on off-planet bases at one level, but at the other level, the public level, you got the greatest load of British twits imaginable. But as you pointed out, Christine, the James Bond that we see, you know, these kind of people don't get involved. They go and get a bunch of other people to do it. So if they're very highly sophisticated weapons experts, they go and get on with it. And the classic case in Britain, where the only kind of ingenuity ends up is some little guy in his shed somewhere and comes up with a weapon system or some kind of design, because the whole basic fundamental infrastructure of control and decision-making in Britain is totally out of pace with what's going on. And again, I say that by design. The Germans, based on the analysis of the weapons and the sophisticated wind tunnel testing and the calculations that they were doing to come up with those aircraft, being built by ordinary companies. There's a lot of people doing this stuff in World War II. The kind of innovation, the kind of design, the kind of technology and thinking, and the mathematics and the aeronautical engineering skills needed are highly advanced in comparison to what was going on with the Allies, which were running around with piston. Well, the kind of airframe design was a generation ahead.
Why do you think the Germans? Why them? Why not?
Well, the Germans, it seems, before the war, were already dealing with interdimensional technologies and developing. They were thinking well outside the sort of let's design it and see if it flies type of approach.
Do you think this is something to do with races? That because I know we're not allowed to talk about different races these days, are we? But the Germans are a different race. They're this Aryan.
Well, we're all different races. The so-called Aryan. That Aryan is a corruption of the Aryan, the higher knowledge from the ancients.
Right.
What was happening in the West was we were following Maxwell's equations, which were corrupted due to Western corporate greed, who'd made a decision early on, or at the end of the 1800s, they made a corporate decision to fake and pollute the science in the West with a corrupted and censored version of Maxwell's equations and the associated equations that are connected to feed into that mathematical science. So the kind of stuff that was being taught at universities in the West was out of date by at least 100 years by the time they were teaching it in the late 1800s. So the science and the education and the engineering and the scientific base was undermined by corporate greed and, by definition, connected with very toxic ETs. I think you've interviewed somebody who we have yet to put on the basis side of this, of your my supreme honor to publicize your great works, Joanna. Christine.
Thank you.
That they were surprised that these Draco ETs were not very nice people. Well, that's because they were dealing with a creature which only gained its intelligence from an artificial intelligence in the first place, which is a predatory artificial intelligence. I'm only working this out now. So basically, our fundamental Western corporate structures are designed and already compromised by this predatory alien and artificial intelligence. And these gobshites are playing with the entire life force of the planet so they can make a buck and nobody else can. And this publication that's been put out by, I think, Oxfam, Illustrate, which is in itself an already compromised charity, is all these charities are. That's why, I'm making generalizations here. The basic fundamentals is that we have a corporate Western industrialized structure which is fundamentally compromised and corrupted and hamstrung from the very start.
So we're going back to this racist thing. Is it like, because the lady I interviewed was Charlie Chaplin's daughter-in-law. She was high up in Hollywood and she's had films made with Jodie Foster, etc., etc. And she was talking about Draco and portals and the Kabbalah, etc. So, I mean, Jews v. Aryans? I mean, is that why Hitler hated Jews? Because there was a...
No, but all this Jewish stuff is all a fake.
Oh, I see.
Jews are a fake construct. They're a parasited so-called race based on these Nephilim creatures in the first place, and they know that. And then you got and the rest is dressage, fraud, and deception.
So, but the Jewish people are human, aren't they?
This is the human aspects of the Jews, as with all of the races here, or we're all extraterrestrials. The problem is that a parasitic, very detrimental bunch of creatures got stuck here, and they've been investing and using human bioframes for their particular aims ever since. So calling somebody a Jew or an Aryan or anything else is irrelevant. It's the creature that's controlling it. In the same way that, as I was taught about Joanne, when she was doing an illegal and completely unethical mind invasion of Simon Parks.
But isn't
Simon Parks has been exposed to demonic, off-world creatures. Some of them connected with the ancient creatures here, the jinn, and they've got all their agendas, etc. And he's been dealing with that as well as he can.
So what was World War II about? Because there was definitely two lots of people fighting against each other. So was that one?
Well, like any war, there are many levels. A war involves people going out and killing each other.
And what about at the highest level?
Highest level, there are people who are instructing and playing those countries against each other and those peoples against each other, just like what is happening now, where we were played to go into the Middle East, completely screw it up, create so much animosity against the West that it created a whole series of Western, or shall we say corporately governed terrorist organizations, which then fanned the flames. The ordinary people on the ground, their lives are destroyed, their cities, livelihood and homes and misery. It's absolutely horrendous what's going on. Those peoples then hate the guts out of the people who did that to them. They see that as the West, as Europe, because that's the nearest bit they can get to. So they got all these Africans and Middle East and Easterns are now invading and wiping out, European culture, while they are being used, just as the Europeans were being used and just as the way that the American soldiers and the actual people on the ground, those soldiers, those people with the guns who go into the battlefield and kill the other guy, they're being used. These other creatures just sit back, make a lot of money out of it, and laugh. And they're sitting back, owning 98%, 2% of the population owning. It's a damn sight less than 2%, owning 99% of the wealth and control.
So in World War II, do you mean it was one entity controlling everything and causing different races or different races, wasn't it?
In order for you to have a war, you got to have one group labeled something and another group labeled another thing. And then the two of them hate each other and fight.
And you're saying
that's the basic mechanisms.
And you're saying the strings are pulled by just one.
Yeah, these creatures. The same thing happened in Ireland. You had the Battle of the Boyne, which wasn't a battle; it was a ritual. They created a bipolar conflict situation in Ireland because they didn't want the ancient Irish, who were the survivors of the great catastrophe, who have within their genetic field structure the ancient knowledge which could defeat these bastards, which is why they had to be targeted first. So they didn't wake up. So the Irish keep on drinking and fighting each other. So the same basic structure is applied to the Aryans or the Nordic reptilians or whatever you want to call them. They end up having a good fight. You've got the Syrians, the off-world Syrians, you got the reptilians, you got all this, they all have a fight, but there's an artificial intelligence at the foundations of this, which is creating this.
And why are the Nazis still in the Antarctica under the ground then?
Well, if you manage to get access to a lot of technology, which is, remember what John Irwin's team were involved with. He was born just before the war started, which means the methodology of how he came along must have been well in operation. Probably the same group of people who were accessing this technology in the late 1800s, who saw the gerrymandered versions of those equations. We're just going to stick to the recent 150 years. That group must have known that these geopolitical industrialists were screwing around on the public level with the technology and the mathematics, so that on a public level there would be a whole echelon of industries which would be highly inefficient, polluting, and extremely destructive to the planet. On another level, those who had access to the real equations and went ahead exploring that would have developed a whole series of scientific and interdimensional and technological devices which gave them access to a whole range of other worlds and other species. And that would have been the people who subsequently started operating through the German levels. But the problem was they got access to this other artificial intelligence, which seems to be the predatory artificial intelligence which got the Dracos here in the first place. Remember, the Draco ETs naturally would never have evolved into space interdimensional travel, not in another 100 million years. But they are here, or they seem to be here, and the natural bioenergetic substances of the Earth, the spaceship that we're on, seem to have limited the number that got here. And those lot are trying to use devices such as CERN and other dimensional technological devices to get more of them here so we can all be wiped out. But it isn't in the interest of the Draco ETs, and it isn't in the interest of any of the physical beings here or any of the other energetic beings here. This artificial intelligence, whatever it is manipulating the base reasoning structures of the intelligences here to wipe us out.
Interesting. I just did think there was some kind of thing going on between the Jewish and the Aryans, or whatever you want to call it.
I mean, the fundamental control structures of the Nazis, or those Nazis, were Jewish in the first place.
Oh, really?
So, I mean, that's why Hitler and all that lot got away.
Really?
The Jews, the so-called Jews, are split into different factions, and you need to talk to a Jew to really get that detailed information. But there are rogue controlling elements involved here who exploit the Jews. The Jews in Israel right now are the biggest victims on the planet because of their own controlling structure, making them and walling them off into that controlling structure, and by definition going to wipe them out. People are being conned here, and they need to wake up if they're going to survive.
I had that, well, I don't know if I did have that Monarch MK Ultra stuff fiddled with upon me when I was in the Catholic orphanage. Probably they did use orphans.
All that stuff you've been exposed to, you've discussed.
Yeah. But since we'd had that, I did have it before when I was listening to Casbolt, as I told you that time. And then when you did a bit of therapy on me, and then it a lot cleared. Thanks for that, by the way. A lot cleared. But I again started getting even more and more recall about a previous life as a Nazi, and just a kind of a connection with that. Thing. I tried to do some free automatic writing around it, and it was like that there was a kind of a brotherhood that committed to reincarnating to be together again. I don't really know.
Well, the person to talk about this sort of stuff really is Lisa Williams. Lisa Williams, who was on Basis 1, and we've been trying to get a Basis 1 update with Barry King, who's constantly very ill. And we'll have to see what this new contact mayor is going to say. Again, her files are being corrupted, being sent to me. So, I mean, clearly we've got third parties in here who are probably listening, who are messing me about. And that's nothing new. But Lisa, again, traced this all back to the Nazis. It traced them back to Mengele, traced them back to the Hamler, or is it Kamler?
What's Kamler?
I keep on getting it. It's either Hamler or Kamler. He was the chief man in charge of the advanced weapons and industrial technologies that the Nazis were dealing with. And the only other Western general who got anything like near what the hell he was talking about was General Patton. And that's why General Patton had to be assassinated, because he got too close to knowing too much.
Oh, really? Yeah, there's just something connected.
And a direct relative of General Patton, a guy called George Patton, with the same name, was instrumental with my pirate stations on the border in Ireland.
Because Douglas Dietrich, when I interviewed him, he said that World War II was a war between the Norse gods and the anti-gods. What do you think of that?
Yeah, but that's woolly language, and it doesn't really help anybody. It doesn't tell anybody who really is involved. I mean, when you say stuff like that, you might as well say it's the war between the blue people of Avalon and the green people of Cork or something. It doesn't actually say who the hell they are, what their background is, or what their agendas is, or what brought them here. What we've got to understand is what these creatures, there are lots of names given, gods of old, or Zeus, or Jupiter, or Jove. You can mention all these names, but it doesn't really give you really who the hell they are.
I was just trying to apply it to my own experience, as you know, that I had that vision of Odin fighting the serpent, and I'm having all this Nazi recall. I actually had an interest in Googling Hitler's speeches the other night, and I found myself listening to them for hour upon hour. I mean, it's just weird, that kind of thing. And then I dreamt about Hitler. He was talking to me, and I really knew him quite well. It's kind of disturbing to me to have all that saturated in Nazi stuff.
Christine, if you look at the background to what happened with Germany, and if you read Cara St. Louis' works about the Prussian education system and how the older, I mean, at that time, Germany had only been a unified state as one country, so to speak, relatively recently. I think it was only maybe 20 or 30 years, because before that, you had the Austro-Hungarian Empire and all that sort of stuff. But the point is that they worked out that they weren't getting a good efficiency return from their soldiers. They were having soldiers, ordinary folk, go and kill some more ordinary folk, so some guy in a castle could tax them more or less. I mean, it's lunacy. Oh. Most of these people, which are ordinary peoples, and I mean, obviously you got the invading hordes from, earlier on, but I mean, we don't want to go into all that. The point was that the Prussian education system was then a method where they could effectively mind control individuals exposed to it, so they would obey without question, and that's fundamentally what they needed. Early on in World War I, the kill rate relative to the weapons and bullets used was very low, because people just shot their weapons in the air. They didn't really want to kill the other guy. We had this stupid situation, wonderful situation, where the Brits and the Germans played football on Christmas Day, on the first Christmas of World War I. What the Germans were then subsequently exposed to, the most draconian and most horrendous reparations, which fed, and plus their currency went through the roof. They went through the most horrendous exploitation of inflationary pressures. It drove the German people into absolute desperation, and Hitler came along and sorted that problem for them, gave them self-respect, gave them nationhood, and gave them something to fight for. And if you'd been exposed to the kind of stuff which the Germans were after World War, the worst thing that happened at the end of World War I was the reparations of the United Nations, or the League of Nations against Germany. If that hadn't happened, you wouldn't have had who the hell put that in place?
I don't know.
Well, that's the point. In Northern Ireland, we had a super United Nations organization going around doing the actual killings to keep the two peoples hating each other. Total manipulation by a United Nations level or super level group who are going around seeding hate, distrust, and discord with ordinary peoples all across the planet. Those people need nailed, and they need to account for the crimes that they've been committing against peoples across this planet. They're going to be nailed by one group or another, because the law is in town, and the long arm of the law is going to nail these guys, and they know it.
But so is it connected then, that MK Ultra experiments with the Nazi stuff?
Well, the kind of control mechanisms which were used to get the Germans to rise up and to weaponize and then fight the rest of Europe and take control, that's whoever or whatever was running that. And remember, a lot of the MK Ultra and Monarch people, and I won't mention their names, a lot of it goes back to Germany.
Why?
I don't know why. There are places in Germany right now, Austria, where these creatures exist, and a lot of the people who've put through these programs remember one of the exports of Project Paperclip. The Americans and Russians got the rocket scientists, but the Brits ended up having the National Health Service, which was effectively a Nazi organization, which was a genetic mapping and controlling mechanism to infiltrate the population and do population and gene tracking. So, I mean, it's right here in Britain where the genetic engineering's going on, the population and social engineering's going on, and that was why one of the main bases, which was in charge of the Irish question, was a base just at Sarum Castle here. It's an ancient fort right beside the twin bases of Boscombe Port and Down here, where these transgenic creatures were made for the off-worlders. And so, I mean, there's a huge connection with Britain and the actual sub-control of global population systems. And Harold Kautz-Vela managed to work out the way, the mechanism, and the Germans are doing this as well. But this isn't a tit for tat thing, where the energetic power grid of the planet was specifically engineered, where there are bad negative energy sites and positive energy sites. The negative energetics of the planet was specifically engineered as a mechanism for mass population consciousness control. And the German there's a lot of evidence on this by researchers that the esoteric German or Germanic issues were doing something similar. In other words, actively energetically engineering the ancient energetic systems that our forefathers were using in active population energetic management control. In other words, standing stones.
It's weird the way I do think there's something strong about race, because I've been reading after I had that Odin encounter of we all have, every race has a different god. And it even says this in the...
Well, that's because we're all from off-world. None of the humanoid races on this planet are indigenous to this planet. We all came from somewhere else. So we'd have some kind of parent collective consciousness would be by definition completely alien, different, because we come from different parts of wherever this universe really is. And the first arrivals were, we would call them now the hominid Sasquatch. There were these giants, and the evidence of these giants all across the planet keeps on being dug up and faked and covered up. And with the evidence now of these long-skulled people that were here at Stonehenge, all massacred in a mass grave, you know, there's other races here. And they're all from, you know, there are evidence of other races or other beings coming through these dimensional gates at Stonehenge and around here. The kind of stuff that Irwin has now revealed on the back of his new book is interdimensional technology. So, you know, naturally we're going to have other beings from other worlds coming and going and arriving and being or left behind in this world. And they're going to have their own agendas, and they're going to have their own backgrounds and cultures and things. But collectively, we're all really still humanoid beings with needs to live, survive, and strive and do things.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the Bible, I've got a Bible scholar coming on Thursday, Mike Kaiser. I was reading about the Elohim, and the Elohim, the lesser gods, they made us. You know, they were the ones that created us.
Well, whoever created us dropped our lifespan from 900 years down to about 250, and currently we live for about 150. And right now, there's a group trying to re-engineer us into cyborgs, which will last forever. That's to say, provided you've got an industrial slave production plant making a spare part to keep you going.
Yeah, I've been reading about that. Those companies like Clomad and Hume, They're quite interesting, aren't they? You need about 3 million and then you can get eternal life.
Yeah. Well, basically, there is no further need for the male population on this planet. The artificial insemination now is the way that humans are going to be made. The relevant genetic selections so that obedient, compliant humans who are controlled by this elite will only be allowed to exist. That's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 generations. The existing population will just simply be allowed to die off. And therefore, the areas of the planet which are required for arable food production are no longer needed, which means they just pollute, aridly destroy the healthy, fertile regions of the planet. There's no need for that. So that the population will be essentially dropped to a small slave breed bunch. There'll be safe zones, which they're already planning for, where the elite will be able to, live in their little bit of paradise. But they themselves are under control of something, and they don't realize it. They're that stupid and arrogant that they'll be okay. They're all right, Jack. But the logic of this situation is we got some kind of parasitic, controlling intelligence, which is toxic to all individual creative life.
Do you think it wants to destroy the white race more than the black race?
The white race is on its way out. The most rapidly diminishing race at the moment are the so-called blondes, and the white races will have no further soul incarnate ability, in the same way that those who built the pyramids vanished.
And why do they want to do that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you got to ask, who's running the show here. But right now, the so-called blonde white races are the agenda of the New World Order is to terminate their existence. And if you listen to some of the leaders of the other races, that's what they want. They want, you can have a few extra babies, but you're going to be wiped out. The thing is, the agenda to this is to make the "I'm all right, Jack" psychosis or psychology behind this, where you're all right, Jack. We'll kill that lot, but we'll be safe because as soon as they're gone, you're next.
Why do they want to get rid of the blonde race first, then?
I don't know why they want rid of the blonde race. The blondes are just the fact is that the blonde race. There's a massive eugenics program in Liverpool where Swedish blonde women are brought over, and they only have children with African, Black, and Asian people.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, I mean that's why So they will, by definition, outbreed them. They will, by definition, they will not have any blonde babies. So by definition, clinically, from a technical point of view, they will die off, and you will only have non-blonde babies. So by definition, that particular genetic stream will become extinct. This is just a technical exercise. We're talking eugenics here, an emotive subject. So those,
I know it's emotional. Even, I lived in a certain area that was adjacent to a very Asian area. I really like the Asian people, beautiful people. But I did find it odd, weird almost, the way the area that I grew up in, it was a little town, and it kind of got swamped over by the Asian culture. And now when you walk through the town, it's like walking through Bangladesh rather than somewhere in England. And I found it quite...
Well, it's called Hounslow, for crying out loud. But the point is, even the Asian culture, with respect to the Asians and all the other cultures and peoples, this has nothing to do with one race here. It's to do with you as your race being wiped out through a process of subdivision and cutting out. I mean, the Asians have the caste system. Now, my understanding about the caste system, that was actually imposed by the British Empire. I mean, I don't know about that. But, when you have a race who then decides one bit of that race is better than the other, and one bit needs to be subjected down and treated like dirt, it's no different than you saying that, okay, within that race, that's acceptable. And then you say, well, another kind of race, I mean, the so-called Jewish races treat all other races as the lowest scum of the face of the earth.
But I thought it weird that this happened to my little town, and then when my mother died, her house was in the generation for years and years, firstly owned by her father, my grandfather. This is all adoptive, and I'm not, saying I'm not trying to be racist. I'm just pointing out it seems odd, okay? And my brother's living in the house now. He shouldn't be, actually. It should be me and my son, because we're having difficulties. But the next door neighbor, who owns a few houses already, an Asian chap, is buying that house, which neither my brother and I can afford to buy, is buying that house to put his son in it. And it just seemed to me to be odd.
Well, that's the point.
What is the point?
This is nature, for Christ's sake.
What is it?
I mean,
nature?
one plant will grow, and it will prevent all the other plants, which aren't part of its genome. It poisons the grass, it poisons the soil. So other species can't germinate there. It's called nature. You breed, you live, you survive in this world, or you don't. If you look at nature, look at the plants, look at other animals, look at anything. They have their territory, they do their breed their area, they keep to their own or whatever. I mean, this is just the way nature is,
What does that mean? What does that say about my brother and I? I know I can look at myself and say lazy asshole and loser, but I think it's because of the programs that I was put into at the orphanage. I mean, I've literally.
The point is, listen, Christine. Okay, if you're a grown-up person, right?
Yeah, okay.
You can't keep blaming mummy and daddy for the fact.
No. For the fact what I'm a loser.
Okay, no, but the point is, you're now aware of those programs.
It's a bit late though, Miles. It's fucking late though, isn't it?
You can't swear on a radio.
Sorry, it's late. It's late. The alarm's gone off. I'm at the sort of, I'm not like frigging 29 anymore, I mean, I haven't got the energy to start building again. Do you know what I mean? I spent my life spying on this one and that one, and I put massive
don't play the victim crap, right? You're grown up, you're intelligent, you're being exposed to a number, and I'm talking to you, I'm talking to everybody here.
Okay.
There's no point whinging and whining. Mummy and daddy said this, and I'm a victim. Grow up, eat the right stuff, get the energy, do the exercise, find out what you need to get yourself motivated, do it, or die, and that's it. Don't blame mummy. Don't blame your mummy's programming or the social programming or Adolf Hitler, the Jews whinging endlessly about Adolf Hitler. Oh, we're a victim. All these terrible things. Grow up, get a life, and sort it out. It's the same basic program.
Well, I can't.
You're all being made into a victim. You're all whinging about it, and then in the meantime, you're being wiped out. Make a decision. Do you want to live or do you want to die?
Yeah.
Find out what the problem is. Find solutions and deal with it.
Okay. It just seemed quite odd, that's all. It seemed quite odd. So that is the extinction of the white man. That's what's going on, basically, is it?
If the white man can't wake up and smell the coffee and sort out his own problems with the red squirrel and the dodo, you're gone. And don't complain about it.
It's not really right, because at the end of the day,
whether it's right or wrong, it's Mother Nature. It's what happens.
How is it?
Whether it's an artificial intelligence coming from another universe, making all these other sub races into something big and powerful, so it can then take control of the earth. Bad guy, good guy. Who cares? If you can't sort it, die. That's it. I mean, for crying out loud, you've got a brain, you're being exposed to knowledge and information, deal with it, sort the solution, and work it out.
Okay.
God, I'm so nasty.
No, it's all right. I just feel a bit old now, I feel like...
Oh dear, crotchety, God, can probably barely get out without assistance.
No, it's not that
What
bad.
a load of whinging. This is bad comedy.
This is what? It's
Oh,
what?
I used to be head of MIT. I used to do all these things. I used to do this. Oh, well, do it now. You're on the radio. Work it out. Sort it. Tell people about it.
I don't want to be seen as racist.
The fact is, the numbers are that the so-called white population is on its way out. That's it. And if they don't want to work it out, I don't have any kids. I'm not propagating it, 6-foot Irish sons of bitches who complain a lot or say nasty things to people. I've got no kids. But I mean, oh, I don't want to bring a child up in this nasty world. Crying out loud, get real, sort your problem out.
I just think it was odd when I saw that. And then I said to my son about, how the Asians are very pushed at school, like, the China, well, they're, I suppose, Asian as well. And it's like they're pushed. And basically, though, the white race, at the end of the day, we're not brought here to be workhorses and to gather as many houses as we can goddamn get, It's changing
Listen,
the world.
While you're busy apologizing for your existence, other people are simply saying, yeah, just you keep on apologizing. Meanwhile, we'll buy the ground from under you and throw you out the door.
Yes, right.
Don't apologize.
What does that mean? Was I apologizing?
Well, I mean, you stand your ground. You either stand your ground and survive or you drop dead. That's it. They use the same logic, and then you end up agreeing with it. And then somebody takes over the control of your media and says, well, you can't say that. It's whatever.
Yes.
So you end up dead. You're not around anymore.
Yeah.
And then whilst you're this is what creatures do in the wild.
Do they
There are
what?
types of insects. They go up to, much smaller insect goes up to a cockroach, injects something into that cockroach, and it gets the cockroach, which is a huge creature relative to this, and marches it. It walks willingly to the nest, where the nest